What's up, music teachers? My name is Josh Fosgreen, and I have been teaching bass online for around about a decade. And I just wanted to give you some advice on how to teach your students online if you've never done that before, and that's something you're thinking about doing because of recent world events, which shall not be named in this video. So the first thing I just want to say is I think there is demand for this, and it is something that's worth doing if you're already a music teacher, because most people still have jobs or money and they need music and they need things to do. So I think this is worth pursuing, as a lot of our gigs have been canceled and we can't work with our one-on-one students in person anymore. So yeah, I think this is an important avenue where musicians can make some money right now. And also, even if you don't have the benefit of a YouTube channel like the one that I have that you're seeing this on, I think all of us have a Facebook profile or an Instagram or some way that we're connected to friends and family through which you could say something like, hey, I'm a professional musician and a music teacher. I've lost a lot of my gigs and students because of what's happening, and I could really use your support. So if you or anyone you know needs piano lessons, saxophone lessons, guitar lessons, whatever you teach, please send them my way. And yeah, I think that that's a way you could expect to maybe find a few new students, or at least a way that you can hold on to some of your current students by working online. So that's enough spiel. I'm going to talk about what stuff you need to have to do this and how to organize your sound inputs for different instruments and stuff. Some stuff to know about teaching online versus teaching in person, and just a couple detail logistical things. And this is just what I know and how I do things, and the way I do things is not the fanciest, most pro way necessarily. It's just the way I've been doing it for a long time that's worked okay for me and my students. So if you know a better way to do anything, comment below, please, so that other people can benefit from your superior intelligence. But I'm just going to do my best because I want to help. Okay, so stuff you need to have. Some kind of webcam. I'm on an iMac here, so I'm just using the built-in webcam. If you have a laptop with a built-in webcam, that's great. If you need to buy an external HD webcam to hook up to your desktop computer, those are relatively inexpensive. You can use a smartphone because they have built-in camera and microphone. I find that's the trickiest thing, because then how do you prop up the phone so you can see your student, and the speakers suck. So I think using your smartphone is the worst solution, but if that's the only one you have, I think you can make it work. I'll talk about the sound stuff in a little bit. Then what you do is just use some kind of video calling technology. Skype or Zoom, I think, are the most universal and functional. I've used both. I still use both. Skype is a little more annoying and has some stupid features you won't need, but it works. And if you're on a Mac platform and your student is too, you can even use FaceTime. Just any kind of video call will work, whatever is doable for you. And you need a good internet connection on both ends, but you can only control the one on your end. And I've found that having at least 5 megabytes per second down, or whatever that measurement is, when you do a speed test, you should say at least 5 for your upload speed. And that is consistent enough to get a good video feed going back and forth. One more little logistics thing I almost forgot, so I'm inserting it into the video here, is lighting. If you don't have experience with shooting video and cameras and lights and stuff, just the really quick one thing you need to know about lighting is you want to have light behind the camera, not in front of the camera. So like what I have going on over here, don't do this. It's stupid. Because what can happen is the camera, especially with a webcam, the camera will set its exposure to the brightest light in the room. So this will end up being well exposed, and then I'll end up being super dark. So you need to be aware of that. So have a light behind the camera, have the camera between you and the light source. Okay, so organizing the sound. Video calling is trickier as musicians because sound and tone and time all matter a lot more than if we're just talking to each other. So what I've found is that organizing complex arrangements of different audio devices is tricky using stuff like Skype and Zoom. So for example, I'm a bass teacher. If I wanted stuff to sound really good, I would maybe run a vocal mic and my bass direct into an audio interface and then run that joint signal into Skype or something. What I found is that creates more problems than it solves. So what I do is I just have an amp sitting right here in the room, and I just turn it up loud enough so that my voice and the bass sound can just go into the microphone. of either the computer, or I literally plug in these crappy Apple earbuds just directly into the computer, and then the student is hearing whatever comes into this microphone's fancy $10,000 Telefunken Apple earbud microphone. Okay, so that's what works for me for bass. I think it would work fine for guitar. If you're teaching some kind of wind or brass instrument, I think just having a mic in the room for your voice and for your instrument will work adequately. Same with piano, acoustic piano, obviously. Just run it off of a mic in the room. And if you're using a keyboard or electric piano, just run it off of an amp, or even the built-in speakers on your keyboard might be adequate. And I'll talk more about tone and stuff in a minute. But you just want to have a game plan. Whatever you do, figure it out, preferably a day or two before the first time you do a lesson with somebody. And if you can, get a friend to do a call with you so you can test your setup, make sure they can hear your instrument and you can hear yourself. And if you have a friend who has the same instrument, you can have them play it to you and see how it sounds. Just kind of get oriented, because with stuff like this, usually something will go wrong. And if you can get that to go wrong before the lesson starts, then you don't end up wasting anybody's time. Okay, how are we doing on time? I'm trying to go fast here out of respect for your time. Okay, so that's basic tech stuff. There are more details, I'm sure, but that's what occurred to me. Okay, so some stuff to know about teaching online that's different from having a student in the room with you. Generally, I would say it's worse. It's better to be in the room with a student, and as somebody who's been teaching almost exclusively online students for the last few years at least, I miss having students in the room. There's fun stuff you can do that you can't do online. So there's that. We just have to deal with it. But it also has a lot of advantages. Like, you can have a student in another country, and the commute is a lot shorter than if they have to buy flights. Okay, so thing number one that you need to know, you cannot play along with your students over a video call because of latency. The amount of latency on a video call for human interaction is relatively small, but for musical performance is horribly large, because even if there's a 25 millisecond delay, that's already a hugely musically significant amount of delay. Even just a few milliseconds is perceptibly rhythmically important. So you can't play along, because by the time they hear what you play, it's later in time than you played it, and then when you hear what they play back, it's twice as late in time, and you'll be like, oh, your time's all off. And so you can't play along with your students. It's a bummer, because that's a fun thing to do. On a similar note, you need to be aware that time gets compressed and expanded on a video call. So I don't know exactly why this works, but on things like Skype and Zoom, and even on phone calls, you can notice this. Somebody will be talking and it'll feel like it slows down for a second, and then it kind of crunches itself back together so you don't miss any words. It works fine for talking with people, but obviously if you're trying to play, I don't know why I thought of this song, but if it just speeds up and slows down, it doesn't sound like music. So be aware that that's gonna happen. I don't think there's anything you can do about that. It's just what happens on the kind of internet connections we have available. And because of that, you can't judge student rhythm particularly well in online lessons. One thing you can do that'll help is make sure they have a metronome on their end. So if the student has this running on their end, what you'll hear is that, first of all, you'll hear the time expanding and compressing, so the metronome will actually speed up and slow down. So you have to assess your students playing in reference to their metronome, which you may hear as speeding up and slowing down, but you know, because you know how metronomes work, that it's not. So you can do some rudimentary judging of student rhythm if they're playing to some kind of reference in the room that you know is metronomic, but you're not necessarily going to hear it as being metronomic. So if you're working on groove and rhythm, and that's an important thing with you and your student, like if you have a drum student or something, obviously that's paramount at all times. It should be important for all students, but anyway, this is not a video about that. So what you can do is have your student record themselves and then send you the recording, and then you can discuss it during the lesson. So however you want to work that out, whether they record it during the lesson and then send it to you, or if you want to have them do it before and then you can listen to it and prep and talk about it during the lesson. There's a number of ways you can do that. But that gets rid of the whole latency issue, and you can actually hear if their time is good or not, and then give them some things to work on for next time, do another recording. That's the best solution I know of. Okay, another thing to know with Skype and Zoom, I think in relatively equivalent ways, they do a lot of noise filtering, which again, for talking, video, and audio calls is great, because if there's like a lawnmower outside or something, because of modern video call filtering, sound filtering stuff, you're probably not going to hear the lawnmower very much. The problem is if you're teaching bass and, hold on, I didn't plug in. If you're teaching bass and your student plays their low E string, after a while, Skype is going to decide that that low E string is background noise, which we all know your bass player is not background noise. They're an important valued member of the band. So you can try to have them turn up to create a higher signal to noise ratio to avoid that, but stuff like that is going to happen, and it's going to affect the tone that both of you hear. So tone is another thing that's really hard to work on through video call lessons, which I think the recording solution I talked about with rhythm would work there too. If your student's like, does this tone work for the style or whatever, you can have them make a recording and get a better idea of what they actually sound like there. Okay, one last thing, this is kind of a logistical thing I didn't talk about earlier, is camera angles. Obviously this is going to vary depending on what instrument you teach. The easiest thing is to use one camera, like I'm doing here, and I just hold my bass, and your student does the same thing, and that works. I think the thing you most commonly have an issue with is piano, because if I have my piano right here, that doesn't do you any good as a student. So I've never taught piano, and I really shouldn't be teaching piano, I promise. But I think what I would do for simplicity is I would put a piano here. So if you just imagine that there's a piano here, ding, 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 ding. So you can see my hands, and also I could rotate back and talk to you when I'm not demonstrating anything. And you could have your student do something similar. Other things you could do, obviously you could put a camera. If you have an external webcam that you're using, you could put that on like a boom mic stand and put it over your hands, but then they lose the connection with your face and personality. So I think that's the simplest thing to do on piano. I was just talking to a piano player who called me asking about this a couple days ago, who wanted to figure out a way for students to see his hands on the piano and see his face. And if you have multiple cameras, what I suggested trying, I've never tried this, is you'd have to do this on Zoom as a video teleconference between one Zoom account with a camera going to your hands, an additional Zoom account on another computer hooked up to another camera going to your face, and then the student. So it would be a three-way call between your hands, your face, and your student. And then the student would be able to bounce between those two cameras. So that's something you can try if that's important to you. But I really think that the easiest thing is the best place to start. And just see if it's working. And if it's not, it's not. And your students are sources of feedback for that. Two final tips that I've found helpful. Accepting payment, I think, is easiest through Venmo or PayPal. You may not have Venmo in your country, but if you do, Venmo is the easiest because there's no risk of there being fees in either direction. If your student pays you through PayPal, make sure that you tell them to use the friends and family option when they send the money. Otherwise, PayPal will take, I forget, it's like 2.6% plus 35 cents flat. So it can be significant if you're charging whatever, 50, 60 more per lesson, and it adds up over time. So make sure that your student is using the friends and family option. Check the payment afterwards and make sure there's no PayPal fee anywhere because they're sneaky. And the very last thing is I found it helpful to write a little template email with all of the information I would want somebody to have if they're curious about taking lessons with me. So I just have it as a text document on my computer, and I should actually pull that up, shouldn't I? So I can tell you what kind of stuff it says. It's just called New Online Student, and I just pull it up. And it just says how online lessons with me work. We use Skype or Zoom or whatever. We get together for an hour. I say a little bit about me personally, that I usually don't work with a curriculum with private students because I have a beginner course where I do the curriculum thing. And then I tell them what they need, which is a webcam, some kind of video call thing like Skype, a good internet connection and an instrument and an amplifier. And I tell them what my rate is and how they can pay and what days I teach and what times I'm generally available and ask them what their time zone is and just basic stuff like that. So because I have that template, I don't have to remember every time what I want to tell a new student, and it saves me a lot of time and energy. So I would recommend writing an easy little template like that for yourself as well. That's all. I really hope this is helpful. Please share this if you know a music teacher who might benefit from this, because we musicians need all of the avenues we can get to be able to keep doing our art on the planet right now. So thank you. Lots of love to you all, and hope you're well.